Welcome to Bledsoe Said So, you guys. I hope you have had a lovely week, and I hope that this episode makes it even lovelier. Before we get into tonight's topic, I just want to go down the line and talk about the things that Alex makes me talk about. Sorry to throw you under the bus, Alex. But just to stay in touch with the things that we've got going on, always check our Instagram, Bledsoe Said So. Pretty soon you're going to start seeing some movement there, and in a few minutes I'm also going to elaborate on this a little bit, but there is a conference coming up. So you guys are always asking, when's the next Skywatch? When's the next Skywatch? Well, it's coming pretty soon, actually. It's going to be in May at a conference in Wisconsin. So I'll save that for just a moment. Check our Instagram for public Skywatches, for our conference schedules, any events that we're doing, social media clips, everything related to the podcast. Just Bledsoe Said So on Instagram. Don't miss it. If you watch the show, you got to be following us on there to stay current. Check out our website, bledsoesaidso.com, so that you can pretty much have access to all of our links, all of our portals, all of our merch, which is a great way to support the show, our Patreon, which is another great way to support the show, and basically everything related to the Bledsoe Said So sphere. Check us out on patreon.com/Bledsoe Said So, which is currently being revamped behind the scenes. So sometime in the next couple months or so, we're going to have a completely overhauled Patreon with a lot more benefits that can be accessed. But for now, we have the $5 and the $10 tier. Just check us out on there if you want to support the show and also receive some extra benefits in the process, like new shows that are on the Patreon feed exclusively, access to our Discord, and in other ways you can even be a part of the show, like having your name in the credits. So check us out over there. And now I want to talk about Wisconsin. So let me get the dates right because I don't want to mess this up. So we're talking May 1st through the 3rd. It is the second annual Contact Modalities Conference. This is a very exciting conference to me. It's kind of nostalgic because it's the first conference that I was ever a part of. My dad is going to be there, my sister, my brother, Chris Jr. I will not be able to make it, unfortunately, because I will have a brand new, freshly delivered to earth newborn baby who hopefully looks like me. Alex will be there in my stead representing the podcast. So you have my dad, my sister, my brother, and Alex on behalf of Bledsoe Said So. Also exciting because it's Alex's first conference, so he gets that experience. Woohoo! Woohoo! It's going to be a great conference. It's going to be just like last year, but no doubt better because it was very successful last year, and I know that it was just a great time, and the people there had a blast, and I think overall it was very successful. So this year they're coming back with a vengeance. There's going to be like, I think it's even more this time. Yeah, 30 different presenters. There's going to be 4 stages running simultaneously with things ranging from, again, sound baths, different contact modalities like things using psychedelics, skywatching kind of activities with my dad. There's going to be 3 public skywatches this time. Last year there was 1, so you know they're packing heat this time. There's going to be a lot of really cool presenters. Like some of the ones that I'm most excited for you guys to see in person are Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell. I'm a big fan of hers. And my good and close personal friend who is a lovely human being, Dahlia, and her daughter, who you probably all know and love, Lidu. And many, many more experiencers, presenters, experts, and researchers will be there showing off their trade. So go to Contact Modalities. Let me get the website there, Alex.
Contact Modalities, xpo.com.
There you go. Bang. Check them out. I promise you guys that just for an all-around good time studying and exploring things in the space, this will be well worth the visit. And if anything for alone, it's an amazing location and a beautiful resort. I really wish I could be there. I really regret that I can't. So you guys will have to accept Alex as my doppelganger. But I really had a good time there. It was really a great vibe. The resort is outstanding. So it's in Delavan, Wisconsin, May 1st through the 3rd, right?
Correct.
I know. Okay, correct. Cool. Thank you to Contact Modalities for sponsoring this episode of the show. Tonight I wanted to talk to you guys about egregores. And I've more or less been pulling an invisible thread. And egregores is something that I felt was important going into the next topic, which is going to be next week's. But before I really go into next week's topic, I think the subject of egregores is very important as well. Not just because of that, but just in general, understanding the way the world works and how reality works. So when you think of the universe, or at least when I do, I can't speak for you or anyone else, but I can speak for me. I have come to understand that the way that it works is that there is a single point of consciousness that emanates all things, that it's God, for lack of better words, that it's the original primordial consciousness that for whatever reason thought everything into being because it had moments of inner reflection. Now, there's all kinds of different parables and allegories and mythologies that talk about why this happened or how this happened. I really think that it's important to look at the similarities between them and understand maybe specifically this part might not be true, this part is true, but the point is there's something to this that is true because thousands upon thousands of years ago, there were so many traditions saying the same thing. At a time when cultures weren't, okay, like for example, how is it possible that 2,000 or 3,000 years ago in Mexico, they were saying the same or very similar things to people in Tibet or Egypt? Probably because there's a truth to what they were all saying. And there's a correspondence there. And the fact, I believe, is that they were in communication with something that was giving them information or wisdom. Perhaps that was higher beings. I don't know. That's not the point I'm trying to make. Perhaps they were all going through varying degrees of spiritual initiation where they were then able to travel psychic realms and receive higher knowledge, maybe through dreams, through out-of-body travel, through downloads. Maybe a mix of all of it is true. Maybe, perhaps, the information is the same in these different continents and different cultures thousands of years ago before there was internet or easy ways to, go between these landmasses. Maybe there is truth to the idea that there was an original pre-flood advanced civilization, that somehow elements of this survived and spread to the corners of the earth and took knowledge from the spiritual tradition there, and it survived and took on the flavor, so to speak, of the surrounding culture over time, and the mythologies grew and it became distilled and sort of watered down, and now we have exoteric versions of these things. So I'm talking about like Atlantis or maybe even Lemuria. Maybe elements of all of these things are true, or maybe some of them are true, but there's something to it, right? So anyway, a lot of these traditions, like if you think of Platonic thought, Gnosticism, which has very clear connections to ancient Egypt, the Templar Knights, the Rosicrucians, the Freemasons, probably most importantly, in my opinion, Hermetic philosophy, alchemy, Kabbalah, Tibetan Buddhism, the Persian, or you could say Zoroastrian thought, and there's probably some that I can't even think of at the moment. It goes on and on, I'm sure. But there were all of these different traditions that were sort of insinuating the same thing, which is that there's this primordial being that, how could I forget? The Bhagavad Gita, Hinduism, Om, the symbol that, vibrates the universe into being from Brahma, the supreme consciousness. So this is like a universal concept that has been around. This isn't a new age thing. This isn't something that just popped up out of thin air. As a matter of fact, at one point, this was sort of the dominant view by a lot of different cultures, maybe until around the church came around and started, adding certain doctrines to things, which became the dominant viewpoint of the last 2,000 years. But before this was pretty decently accepted by many that the universe is emanated into being by one consciousness. That there exist many realms of psychic phenomenon that basically maneuver through these planes at will. And it's a spectrum of existence in the sense that if you think about human life, where we are on the spectrum, we are somewhere in the middle where we're at the crossing place between the lower worlds and the higher worlds. You can think about the symbol of a cross, right? The cross has been around for many thousands of years, even before Jesus was crucified on the cross. I'm not, making an opinion either way about that. I'm just saying that this is a symbol that has been around for a long time that might have deeper meaning. And some would say, like if you observe the Rosicrucian system, for example, which is really, really old and very much does claim to have existed since before Christian tradition, that the cross symbolizes the interplay between the worlds of spirit and matter. That's why it's like there's the vertical line or the y-axis on a graph, and then there's the horizontal line or like the x-axis. The horizontal being the physical plane and the vertical being the spiritual plane. And that human life, human existence is somewhere as like a hybrid between those two worlds. That we exist in the crossing place between the world of spirit and the world of matter. That's why humans are the apex of Earth life. We have things within our consciousness that is not possible in things like animals, minerals, and plants. I'm not saying we're better than them. I'm just saying as far as evolution goes, we can do things like sit around and talk on camera about philosophical traditions just for fun, just to kill time. Dogs can't do that. Cats can't do that. Birds can't do that. Nobody's disputing this. You know what I mean? We are the apex of life here. So what's so special about humans? Well, because we tread both worlds, because we tread the physical and the spiritual, or the psychic and the material, right? So in all of these traditions, it was said that thoughts are things, that thoughts, when you think thoughts, that you are actually creating a vibratory effect upon the world that you cannot observe with the five physical senses, because you have an extra sensory perception beyond the ordinary five physical senses, that you could think of it as your aura, you could think of it as your third eye, your second sight, your clairvoyance. It doesn't matter. They're all similar things. You know what I mean? Your psychic senses, or you could say like your spiritual organs. You have faculties about your being that are able to perceive non-physical phenomenon. So when you get into mystical and esoteric tradition and you begin to come into contact with these paths and walk along this on a journey of trying to explore it, what it means, peel back the layers of secrecy and mysticism, and more or less begin to embody the teachings. A book that I will say, last week I had a dream. And when I was a child, I would read. I was a big nerd, and still am. You don't really shake those allegations. But it's just a fact, man. And when I was a kid, I would read like crazy. And I literally would, not all the time, not every book, but for sure, there were many books that I would just sit down and I would read it like in one sitting even. Or maybe in 2 days, 3 days, like big books, like 400, 700 page books. I would just read. Like I had this intense level of focus and I would just blast through them and on to the next one. I loved books. And when I became an adult, just the rat race of life, that kind of fell away from me. And, I don't really read books anymore. And long story short, I had a dream last week that I sat down and I read a book. And I woke up and I was like, I want to start reading again. What do I read? And I was like, oh, I know what I want to read. Rudolph Steiner. So I read through The Way of Initiation by Rudolph Steiner. It's a very short read. I did the audiobook, which took me about 3 hours because I like to do things. I like to multitask. I like to, listen to things and then do whatever it is I do. And that book really inspired me. Ironically, I had already decided that I was going to talk about this subject, but then this book kind of came into my lap after this dream, and I read it, and it was like perfectly on target with a lot of the things that I was going to discuss here. Now, Rudolph Steiner is so important because he was connected to several traditions and even created one of his own called anthroposophy. And the thing about Rudolph Steiner is that he was believed by many to sort of be an authority on these things, like, the Rosicrucian tradition, in the sense that he was giving the information to the public in an easily digestible way without you spending a lifetime going down the path yourself and having to go through veils of secrecy and ritual initiations to have knowledge revealed to you. He was just giving it. So reading Rudolph Steiner by many is considered about the closest that you could get to the information concealed by the Rosicrucians throughout the ages without actually being a part of a tradition or a lodge yourself. So understand that when you read Rudolph Steiner, you're not just reading someone's opinion, but what you're reading is an embodiment of a several thousand-year-old tradition that's being dispensed in book form, which is very valuable, at least to me, someone who likes to read books. So, in this book, I found it very profound that right off in the beginning, it talks about one of the very most important faculties of someone on the path of initiation. So, I think it was, I can't remember the exact terminology. You're not an initiate until you've more or less gone through the process, which is sort of what we talked about last week, right? But whatever the term is, whether it's, novice or, just someone who's on the path, right? You're seeking the knowledge, you're seeking the revelation. There comes to be this theme of like, why is nobody out there talking about this? Why isn't this information public? Why don't we just, why is it you Google Freemasonry or you Google Rosicrucian or whatever, and you can't just read everything you want to know? Why is there secrecy? I used to think this way. That's why I know this all too well. And then, of course, your mind goes to places like, well, it's demonic, it's devilish, it's satanic, they're worshiping the devil. And there's these layers of unknown that you have when you approach these subjects because you're not a part of them and you don't understand what it is that they're talking about in secret. That's one narrative. And as you go through layers of gaining knowledge and receiving wisdom from reaching higher levels of, you could say, awareness or having major epiphanies, which could also be understood as complete and total reality shifting realizations about certain things, you realize that there are multi-dimensional layers of narrative to truth, to this information. So on one narrative, and this is just for an example, it's kind of a tangent, but just like to illustrate, on one narrative, you have the book of Genesis. And most of us, if we grew up Christian, we grew up being taught that, the serpent is the devil, and that it went to the Garden of Eden and it tricked Adam and Eve and it led them astray and made them disobey God. And it's just that the serpent is the devil. It's symbolism. That's one layer of narrative. And then you go through to the next level of narrative, which is, well, I've learned about this Gnosticism stuff. You go through and you learn, okay, well, maybe the serpent is just symbolism for truth or higher knowledge or transformation. And that maybe the story of Adam and Eve is an allegory about our fall into materiality. And, it's just, that's a very kind of brief example, but there's multiple layers of narrative that you have to kind of peel back as you approach these subjects. And you begin to realize that a lot of the information discussed in these traditions is not physical, that it is something that can only be sensed with the psychic senses, that the way of initiation is unlocked as you go through the inner journey of reaching higher levels of consciousness, that it is a lifestyle, which I'm going to talk a lot more about next week, because that's the whole subject of next week's episode. But I'm getting somewhere. So you realize that a lot of the information contained therein and the symbolism is representative of certain invisible concepts. And a lot of these concepts and these traditions that are supposed to be explored through the unfoldment of the psychic senses as you go down this path of evolution is that your thoughts are things. And that first and foremost, when you begin this path, you have to realize that because you are made in the image of God, that because you are a fractal piece of the infinite mind that thought everything into existence, that your thoughts have power, that your thoughts create, and that they create force and motion and the invisible world of the spirit. So when you realize this, you realize that a part of the journey or the true spiritual path is that you have to become aware of your thoughts. And then you have to begin to self-regulate. And then you have to think about beginning to master your thoughts. Because if your thoughts are so powerful, your negative thoughts can cause great destruction. And it's not necessarily in a way that you can see. It's not like Harry Potter or, Charles Xavier, where you think a thought and then, someone collapses. It's not like that, but it's more subtle. It exists in the realm of causality that cause an effect on the world. And you have to think about the world as, you could think about it like a hologram. When you think of the all-seeing eye on, the dollar bill, or it's popularly known as on the dollar bill, well, you probably know this by now, that a lot of the founding fathers were either Freemasons or Rosicrucians, and they had an understanding of this symbolism. And everybody, I am guilty of this myself. At one point, it's like, oh, the eye is the all-seeing eye of Lucifer. It's the eye of the devil. That's not true. What it is the eye of God, that it is the witness consciousness. Witness consciousness means when you, Alex, the guy on your driver's license, when you're sitting still or walking or doing anything, and you have a thought, oh, I got to pay my taxes. Oh, I got to take the trash out. Oh, I got to walk the dog. Oh, I got to feed the baby. You're thinking. You're always thinking. I'm always thinking. We're constantly thinking. There's somebody beneath all of those active thoughts. There is an aspect of our consciousness that maybe we could understand as the subconscious, but there is a part of our consciousness that is silently observing everything, and it is connected to everything. And it could be understood as God being the all-seeing eye that witnesses everything in all of creation. And that part of yourself is connected to the higher spiritual worlds and the physical world. And it is somehow ingrained in your psyche to be simultaneously aware of everything in your environment. So it's like you are a fractal hologram where you are rendering reality in the neurons and the nervous system of the body and in the brain, but you are also a conduit for consciousness coming from a higher spiritual plane. So you're existing in both worlds, your physical and your spiritual at the same time. So the external world around you is being manifested from your thought, from your witness consciousness, from that aspect of your being that is connected to everything. And that's kind of like part of the reason, meditation and spiritual practice and things like that are good, because you come more into contact with this part of yourself, right? But that's another subject. So you're connected to higher worlds in the realm of thought and in psychic phenomenon. So you're rendering reality from within. It's a two-way hologram. So the things in the external world are a product of your internal environment, and they have a reciprocal effect on one another. So in the sense that things outside of you can be traumatic and they can cause harm to your psyche, but also things are being manifested from your psyche in the sense that your behavior is a reflection of that, right? So your inner state of being, your subconscious, your emotions, which is kind of like a deep, watery layer beneath the conscious mind, that all informs your conscious behavior. So step one on this path is to begin to, be aware of your thoughts, because your thoughts have a vibratory effect. So for this reason, I wanted to talk about egregores. So egregores.
It's an incredible intro.
Oh, you said 10-minute intro.
No. I think it's funny. I'm like sitting here. I'm really enjoying listening to you talk. And then I'm like, oh yeah, we're here to talk about egregores. Sorry.
Somebody once told me that in order to receive the power from the universe or God, which is your birthright, you have to have the right heart. You have to be humble. You have to be loving. You have to be full of joy. And I do believe that to be true, because it's like, dude, a toddler, right? A toddler is emotional, moody, dramatic. They can't regulate. You wouldn't give them, access to a nuclear bomb or a gun or a knife or something. You wouldn't give them something that has the ability to cause devastation, because they don't have the nuance to wield it without harming people, right? And in the same sense, that is the unfoldment of your psychic senses as well. It's a mechanism that is built into our fundamental makeup, that in order to go down this path of spiritual initiation, we have to truly grow. We have to evolve. We have to lighten our heart. And as we begin to be aware of our thoughts and regulate our thoughts and how we think towards others and treat others, before we do that, before we walk down that path, that doorway to the temple of psychic wisdom will never be opened. It won't be open to us. And then, of course, there's another conversation, which is that there are dark paths to do similar things, right? Of course, there's like dark magic and stuff like that, but those always have repercussions. And they never go well for people. So we're not going to talk about those things. But the true path, or what I like to call the way, next week's episode, step one is becoming aware of your thoughts. And the eventual realization is to master the world. You have to master your thoughts, right? You have to begin to think more positive, more kind, more loving, more humble. Because in the psychic world, in the invisible dimension, there exist thought forms. Because when you begin to think, whether it's positive or negative, you are creating a charge that is either feeding or creating thought forms, or what could be known as egregores. There exists a whole dimension around us of thought, and there are more or less beings that have even in some cases achieved their own personality and their own will. And things like fear and suffering and strife is like being siphoned to give them sustenance so that they continue to operate in that dimension. And then there are good ones too, good thought forms that we can be connected to that can more or less benefit us. And then there are other thought forms like the United States of America or Christianity or Japan. You know what I mean? There are egregores that exist at many different levels of existence, basically, levels of scale and magnitude. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking along the levels of scale, like Kleenex, or like, we're kind of getting into brand and brand image, but it's kind of the same. Or like last week, I think I said Nike, Yeah. It's just smaller portions of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe that makes it easier for someone to wrap their mind around. Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, maybe. But, the more I think about it, those are probably more like sigils. They could be thought forms too. I don't know. That's just my take. But,
yeah.
So I want to talk about morphic resonance for a little bit. There's this brilliant scientist named Rupert Sheldrake who is still alive today, and he has this brilliant theory of morphogenetic resonance. And the idea is that let's think about like there's different dimensions of existence, right? This is the dimension of effect. Things just happen here. They come into being. But there's another layer or realm where things are being formed into being, or it's causal. So you have the cause and effect, right? So he talks about the morphic field, which is a plane of phenomenon where things are being morphed into structure. And he initially began talking about this in the sense of like biology and epigenetics and DNA. But over time, he came to find that this was true also in like psychology, sociology, bigger fields of focus, like not just the human body, but human behavior. You know what I mean? It's the whole 100th monkey thing where, monkeys have not been able to use tools forever and ever and ever. And then one monkey finally figures it out, how to use a spoon, and then monkeys start popping up all over the world how to do it. There's some sort of plane of causation that holds memory, that whenever things are achieved or formed, it becomes repeated and repeated and repeated. So a morphic field is an invisible organizing field that shapes the form, structure, and behavior of self-organizing systems, from atoms and crystals to cells, organs, organisms, animal groups, societies, and even mental habits. These fields are non-physical, like gravitational or electromagnetic fields, but informational and memory-based, and exist within and around the systems they influence. They guide morphogenesis, or the coming into being of form, explaining why embryos develop specific shapes despite identical genes in all cells. Unlike the rigid laws of nature, morphic fields are habits, patterns strengthened by repetition over time. The key process is morphic resonance, past similar patterns which form behaviors and instinct. They resonate with and influence current similar ones across time and space. The more a pattern has occurred historically, the stronger, easier it becomes for it to recur, even in isolated new instances. So, as I said, over time, his view was strictly on biology, which then morphed to be behavioral, social, cultural, and mental levels. So the idea is that there is some plane of existence that is influencing the physical world that's being discussed from a scientific view. And the idea is that, like, this actually happened, that there was this maze that was unsolvable by mice or rats. And it was a very challenging one. And then once one of them solved it, all over the world in different places, they kept solving it. Or the sense that, the 4-minute mile. Nobody could beat the 4-minute mile. And then somebody beat the 4-minute mile. And now all of a sudden, it's just under 4 minutes. And it keeps getting beaten and beaten and beaten and beaten. So there's this realm of causality that is somehow connected to our social collective unconscious that is influencing human behavior. What I'm trying to say is that there is a measurable field. There's a perceivable field where we are all somehow connected by some entangled force that influences our genetic structure and our cells, and even, our thoughts and our conscious behavior. It affects animal learning. Like I said, rats learning mazes quicker. That's actually true. Rupert Sheldrake experimented with rats and proved this, that once one rat could do it, all over the world they could start to do it, and more would do it. Crystal formation, new crystal compounds were found to form faster once the structure was created. So they would experiment with new crystalline formations, and then they would start popping up in different places. Birds flocking, dogs knowing when their owners return. Can
we pull that back? So man is creating crystal structures in a lab that don't exist, and then they begin to pop up naturally?
I guess. I didn't look too deeply into that, but that's what it's suggesting, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all crazy, but that specifically.
And then, obviously, and I know somebody, my friend Arky from the Monroe Institute, and one of the ones who trained me to become an outreach trainer, he personally told me about something he did, but also that it's been experimented with at large, the idea of influencing the field of perception where you're out in public and you try to get someone to notice you and they turn and notice you. That's a phenomenon too.
Or would this be the same of like, you get a new car, so you start seeing that car everywhere? Or do you think that's more of like a human thing?
Yeah, that's like, they also call that like the blue paperclip.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's different scales, but I'm trying to think, is it connected or not? I mean,
I'm sure it's connected in some way, but that's kind of different. That's like once you bring something into your awareness,
right,
you begin to notice it. Like for example, Jenny and I bought a Kia last weekend. Now I feel like I'm seeing Kia Tellurides everywhere. Mm-hmm. Or in the weeks leading up to buy one, I feel like I saw them everywhere.
Right.
Because I'm paying attention.
But is it, maybe it's with the crystalline structures and all these things you're talking about, once it becomes observed by the observer, the all-seeing eye, that it then is possible or observed more, or I don't know, maybe I'm just confusing myself.
I don't know. But the point I was trying to make there is that there's some sort of intelligence field where things are intrinsically connected behind the physical world that is influencing patterns. Obviously, we've known that there is a spiritual dimension. And I think that modern science is beginning to approach this through its own lens and is beginning to observe this and make contact with this force. And I think in the future that we're headed, that, it's going to continue to progress, where, modern science is going to be rapidly discovering evidence of we're immortal consciousness. We can leave the body. I've seen multiple times in the past 6 months, there's things popping up where like people are beginning to communicate in dreams and they're proving it. All kinds of weird stuff is possible, Time and space aren't so relevant when you look at, the big scheme of things. It's relevant to us because it's our perspective, like the blue paperclip thing. So egregores, what are egregores, right? Why did I want to talk about this? They are non-physical entities or autonomous thought forms, like a group mind or collective psychic presence that emerges from the shared thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and intentions of a group of people. Once formed, it can take on a life of its own, influencing the group that created it, gaining independence, and even persisting after the original members separate. It acts like a psychic organism or an artificial group soul. The term comes from the Greek egregoros, meaning wakeful or watcher, linked to the idea of vigilant guardian entities. Some trace it back to references in the book of Enoch for watchers or fallen angels, though the modern occult usage is more recent. French occultists in the late 19th, early 20th century popularized it in groups like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn or Eliphas Levi's circles, and it gained traction in 20th century magical orders like Rosicrucianism, Theosophy, and especially Chaos Magic, how egregores form and work. It is a collective focus. The group is directing some sort of sustained attention, emotion, ritual, or belief. That could be, in other words, you don't have to be aware of the thing for it to be a thing. You know what I mean? So like a group belief even toward a shared idea or a symbol. There's your Nike or your Kleenex. An archetype like a magical lodge, a religion, a fandom, a political movement, a meme, a corporation's brand spirit. It begins feeding on and being sustained by the collective energy and can start influencing members back, like reinforcing beliefs, inspiring actions, and creating synchronicities. Some egregores outlive their creators, like national identities. You could think like Jesus Christ.
Michael Jackson.
Michael Jackson, yeah. Pop culture figures turned deities in chaos magic. They're not necessarily inherently good or evil. It depends on the group's intent and emotional quality. A loving spiritual community might create a protective, benign one, or a fear-based or hateful group could birth, parasitic and evil controlling entities, which is certainly the case in the world. And then there's another phenomenon, which I'm not going to spend too much time on, but it's known as a tulpa, which is like another level of this. Are you familiar with tulpas?
Only that it's been mentioned on the show once before at least.
At least, yeah. So a tulpa refers to a sentient thought form, which is what I was talking about earlier. Sometimes they can gain their own will. Like, think like a demonic
Like
spirit.
Lovecraftian.
Doesn't have to be. Could be a demon or an angel,
Okay.
you know?
Okay.
An autonomous mental entity deliberately created through focused intention, visualization, meditation, and sustained mental effort. It's one of the most direct, personal examples of a thought form in practice. The term comes from the Tibetan Buddhism. I don't know how to pronounce this, but I'll try. Sprulpa, meaning emanation, manifestation, or phantom. In Vajrayana traditions, advanced practitioners could create illusory or emanated beings or objects through intense concentration, often as tools for teaching or protection or testing the illusion of reality. There is a book that I kept, when I was researching this subject of egregores, this kept popping up, that there was someone named Alexandra David Neal, who in 1929, she wrote a book called Magic and Mystery in Tibet. She actually went to Tibet and claimed to have come in contact with a tulpa that was created to have the identity of being like a jolly monk figure. But allegedly, the story goes that over time, the tulpa became rebellious and became a menace. And it was like they were trying to figure out how to dissolve it. And then, so there's even another layer onto that, which I'm not even going to really talk about, which is golems, which in certain forms of esoteric Judaism, they believe in the concept of taking a thought form or a spirit and binding it to a physical object and creating a golem. So there's all kinds of pop culture around this, but not going to focus on that, right? I don't want to talk about dark stuff. So anyway, thought forms, egregores. I wanted to talk about egregores because I think it's important going into next week's conversation. The idea that we are multidimensional beings existing on many different layers of consciousness simultaneously, that we're here in the physical world, but then we also exist in the spiritual world. So step one of the initiatory path, when I say the initiatory path, I mean you are going on the journey of spiritual enlightenment. You are seeking transformation from the inside. I think in some way, everyone is seeking to become a part of something bigger than themselves. Everyone is. Well, what if they're an atheist and they don't believe in God? Okay, well, they're connected to atheism. They're connecting themselves to a tradition that is denying tradition. Oh, well, I believe in science. Well, there you go, right there. You're connected to a social construct that says the only the only phenomenon that is verifiably true has to be observable by scientific methods, and some sort of hierarchical authority figure is telling you that it exists because it's peer reviewed or whatever. That's that in its own right as an egregore. Or, a political movement. Everybody is seeking connection to something. And I see it as there's this dimension of so many different thought form entities that are attaching themselves. Actually, weirdly enough, 2 weeks ago, I was laying in bed and I kind of have, it's really weird to talk about, to be honest, but I talk about a lot of weird things. I sometimes now, after having gone through the gateway voyage and have come home and like more or less opened the psychic faculties, I'll be laying there in bed or otherwise sometimes, and I'll just like spontaneous. I just call them psychic experiences because I really am like at a loss of words of how to describe them. And sometimes it's out of body, sometimes it's not, but it's like my vision, even when my eyes close, it's like my inner vision fades and is completely replaced by something else. And I know it's a complete difference between my thoughts, or because it's like, some sort of visual movie is being shown to me. It's very weird and I can't explain it, but sometimes things happen to me now and messages come through. And I was laying there and this image started coming through to me, and it was like I was being vividly shown that there are so many wicked people in this world who walk around daily life and they can't even see it, but there's like a dark shadow attached to them, feasting on them, and it's whispering into their ear and it's perverting them. And I think that is the case of the modern world, that there's so many people that are led astray by dark spirits, by thought forms. And I think that manifests in a number of ways. And that could be, I guess I'll just say it, being radicalized on the internet. But there's a lot of people out there that are just letting themselves be deranged by people online, on forums, or, in watching movies or listening to music. I think in a lot of people this happens because of music that they listen to. And there's people connected to certain energy fields that are weakening their spiritual perception and their spiritual senses. So
almost unknowingly getting involved with an egregore.
Yes. And I say this time and time again, that the true satanic path is not about worshiping Satan. It's not about going to some secret coven of witches or people who claim to be vampires or anything like that and seeking connection with the dark force. That does happen. That does exist. But I think the true path is, in most people, they're blinded by illusion. They have lost touch with the spirit world, and they are revolted by the idea of some sort of Christ-like ideal. There are many people in this world who hate Christ. They hate just the very idea that you somehow got to work on yourself, that you have to be a better person. And that's why I know I keep talking about next week's episode, but I did tell you guys in the beginning that this one is to really set the stage for that one. But I think that it goes so much beyond that, and that this is a universal truth, that a fundamental part of our existence here very much depends on how we evolve. That this silly little human life that we live, and no, I don't believe we're trapped on a prison planet. I don't believe, I think that we're in hell, but that's an allegory, and it's not literal, that we're not, being punished, but that the truth is, remember we talked about multidimensional layers of narrative to truth. I believe somewhere at the highest layer, the truth is that we come here to grow, that there's an immortal part of ourselves that always exists at the source of all creation with God. But time and space aren't linear, so every possibility of every lifetime that you've ever lived and will live has already happened, and it's happening simultaneously all at once, and they're all connected to each other, which is why a lot of people, they have past life regressions, and the thing in their past life is so related to what they're dealing with now, because there's a connection between all lives. It's an evolutionary path. There is a natural involution and evolution, meaning there was this impulse from the spiritual world to form into being, and then there's or I guess that would be evolution, and then there's the involution, which is the return. So it's like we're evolving back up. So I guess the point I'm trying to make there is that the reason we're here is to remember why we're here. It's to evolve so that we can return home. And we go through many, many lifetimes asleep and unaware of this, just automatically going through what life throws at us, until at one of those maybe thousands or millions, I don't know how long the earth has been here. They say one thing, they say another. I don't really know, but it's a long time, right? We go through all of those lives until finally, in one of them, we realize the point of it, which is our true nature, which is we're divine, we're immortal, we're the children of God, metaphorically speaking, in the sense that the divine spiritual forces coalesced to form us into being. And we're a part of that. Just like your DNA from your parents is within you. You are equally part of your mother and your father. And it works the same way, that the divine forces are a part of us. And I do suspect that is in our DNA as well. And that will also be discovered. I think that we have actual genetic markers that come from, that have special properties. And there's all kinds of symbolism about this with, the DNA helix patterns and whatnot. But, so our thoughts matter. They're very powerful. And it's very powerful what we tune our thoughts to. Why it does matter what we believe. Because what we believe shapes our behavior. It shapes the outcomes around us, because more or less the forces, or maybe I should say the groups and the ideologies and the philosophies that we cling to, we are more or less inviting the forces of psychic phenomenon in an invisible dimension that attach to us and influence and affect us and feast or nourish us. So I think it's very important to remember that truth is universal, that it's not necessarily about what you acknowledge to be true, for it to be true, that it's not about what you believe for it to be true, but it is about objectively good and evil forces in the universe. So there is a delineation between, the good path and the bad path. And it's important to be choosing to be a part of good, of the good path, of the spiritual path, of what I like to call the way. Because there are thought forms that exist that are very real. And there are phenomena that pass through worlds that we can see on the visible spectrum, like the lady and like beings of light. And you could say like seraphim, like archangel type beings that are so powerful that they can just fully walk between worlds and we can witness them with our physical senses. And that's a very rare, special kind of thing. That's a very rare, special being. And there are many scales and orders of beings, right? But yeah, I don't know. I don't really know where to go from there, other than I wanted to talk about the concept of egregores and thought forms, and why it's so important for us to be aware of our thoughts, because we have to remember that thoughts are things, and that thoughts are very real, and in many cases very much entities that in their own existence can have, thoughts and feelings and desires and want to feast on you and attach to you or help you and lift you up. Like, for example, someone who says, they wear the pentagrams, and they're like the upside down pentagrams. And they're like, the Satanic Temple, they don't really worship Satan. It's just like an atheist political movement, and, yada, yada, yada. That on one level is true. And I'm not going to get all into the darkness and about how that's actually, really not true. And there's a much darker undercurrent there, and people in that are involved with other things too. But the point I'm trying to make is like people fool themselves and they attach to things because they think there's no deeper meaning or power behind it. Or like politics, right? That's a big one. That's really also another one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about this, because people are hypnotized by this, what I believe is truly an evil psychic parasite that calls itself, Republican or Democrat. It looked like you had something you wanted to say a second ago, or were you just taking a deep breath?
No, I was going to say, monitor your thoughts or be conscious of your thoughts, because you are more than likely either becoming attached to an egregore or contributing to an egregore, whether you realize you're doing it or not.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. That, I fully agree. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make of this is like, we know that certain very high emotional states cause different brainwave patterns. We also know that brainwave patterns can be remotely affected through entrainment, through resonance. I know, because of my experience with the Monroe Institute and everything that they've taught me, that even just hearing sounds can cause your brain to shift into higher states of consciousness. And it can cause the hemispheres of your brain to actually become perfectly synchronized through the corpus callosum, which is this thin little string, this flesh string that connects the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And you always hear like, oh, women can multitask better than men, you know, like they have the baby on one arm, they're cooking, they're on the phone, you know, doing something. And it's true. It absolutely is scientifically true because they have thicker corpus callosums than men. That's just a fun fact I learned in my psychology studies at university. But this corpus callosum is the part of the brain that communicates between the hemispheres. And just by hearing sound, that signal can be sent through this corpus callosum so that the two parts of your brain begin to harmonize and that you can go into expanded psychic states of consciousness. That's just from some noise, right? So the point I'm trying to make is, what about the things that aren't making a noise, but they exist in that energy field around us, that there are entities all around us, that our physical bodies have not evolved yet to be able to see, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. They are there. And there are beings of thought that we have created through our own greed, through our own malice, through our own envy, through our jealousy, all that negative shit, and the positive shit, like Jesus. And because of this notion that we are powerful beings whose thoughts create reality, that there are forces that exist, which, you know, the reason I like, why Jesus, right? Because first of all, it's the most perfect example of a human who entered earth life, mastered the state here, and ascended. You see what I'm saying? It's the most perfect version. It doesn't matter to me whether it was literal. It doesn't matter to me if he was born a virgin birth. Doesn't matter to me if he died on a cross. None of that matters to me. What matters to me is that there are billions of people throughout the last 2,000 years who believe in the divinity and the meaning of this message. And there's many good messages, right? There could be several others, like Zoroaster or Siddhartha or whoever. There's several. You know what I mean? There's several good examples. Go ahead. You look like you're just dying to say something.
No. I'm just putting puzzle pieces together. I'm thinking of the born again Christian whose life immediately becomes better.
Mm-hmm. Because they connect to this force.
Because you connect to the thought egregor, you become aligned with this divinity that people have been pumping positive thoughts into for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
You know? And then you wonder why doors start opening up. People start talking to you. You start
people
to have
miracles.
A better outlook on life. Miracles. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just putting on my gears are turning. That's what you're seeing.
Yeah. Alex is like, usually his mic's like this. And the reason I'm like, do you want to say something? Because he's like this. Like he's gonna say something, but he missed the mark. So that's why I'm like, did you want to say something? Because I'm trying to make sure you don't.
It's a fine dance between
I know
interrupting the flow of Ryan Bledsoe and
it's just funny to watch.
A word in, and then I say something stupid like Kleenex and Nike. You know.
I don't think it's stupid. No, it's funny because I can see that you're trying to, but you don't want to interrupt.
Well, the thing earlier was a different thing, and it's past now.
Yeah,
because you also kind of cover it, like
I see. I answer your question before you're gonna ask it.
Yeah,
but yeah, that is more or less the point that I'm making about this subject. So that, because next week I wanted to really focus on this idea, right? But there are real spiritual forces. Yeah, why is it that people become Christian and miracles happen?
And not that it can't happen with any other religion.
It does.
It's just
I know
an
it does.
example. It's an example.
Yeah. I think it's the example that's packed with some of the most powerful symbols, at least in all of Western culture. You know, it's the strongest example. And then you go to the East, you go to India, or you go to Tibet, or you go to China, or you go to whatever, and they have things that we don't even know about, and it's a whole other universe.
I mean, why does the opposite happen with substances? Why does the opposite happen with alcohol?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, obviously there's some physical,
You're lowering your vibration.
physical effects of this, but you're kind of creating a false idol in a sense of, you know, this habit becomes more important than aligning yourself with something positive. And then you enter this downward spiral, which is just the same thing on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, also, I really do think that people, you know, just the alcohol and the substance thing, they're lowering their vibration to the point to where I think there is no defense system. And of course it has a physiological effect too. Like, you know, alcohol makes you super dehydrated, which is why you get drunk. Yeah, your liver, all that stuff. But then there's another element too, which is like a lot of people drink and they beat their wives or they kill people and these demons come out. And it's like, I do think that there is also an invisible world. Like there's an animal world. There's the human world, which is our perception of reality. There's the chemical and molecular world. There's the spiritual world. And these are just like layers of dimensions, right? Of evolved existence.
Right.
And I think that we're all interlapping with these layers simultaneously. You know what I mean? And I think that there is clearly consciousness in the chemical world as well. And that's why certain chemicals can cause profound realizations and evolution of character, like, you know, psilocybin or DMT, or in many, many cases, I have no experience with this, but in many cases, LSD, ayahuasca, even cannabis, good and bad, but it helps a lot of people. I think it helps a lot of people because there is a vibratory effect in the chemical world of consciousness too. But there's a lot of chemicals out there that have very bad and harmful vibrations, like alcohol, like heroin, like, you know, yada, 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 all these bad drugs.
I think people definitely can get caught up in the cannabis egregore too.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And I'll just leave it at that.
Or just
I don't
people
want
can
to
just
dive
abuse
into
it.
the specific.
People abuse
obviously.
it. Yeah. I think it is a medicine, and I think when used too much, it is abuse. But I don't think it's nearly the same abuse as like alcohol.
No, there's
you know, just
I agree.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's worse things than cannabis abuse, but it can really ruin some people's lives too. That's a whole other subject. That's a whole other thing. But
my bad.
No, you're good. You're good. You always have room to talk on the show. People for you, they're like, you don't let Alex talk. It's like, no, I beg him to. I beg him to talk. He's coming around.
2026.
2026, right? Yep.
Yeah.
The year that Alex talks more. That's true. That's coming down the pipe. But, you know, it's so important what we align our thoughts with, what we feed our thoughts with. Happiness, joy, love, kindness, humility. But as you know, the human mind seeks attachment. It seeks some sort of form. It understands the world as forms. You look around, your brain is wired to recognize patterns and render a reality that makes logical and orderly sense. And I think that in a way, your thoughts seek this too. I mean, even think like the mind of God thought everything into order. I think we like order. I think chaos isn't inherently evil, but it's the lack of the divine intelligence. It's like what Thomas Campbell says. He's like the larger consciousness system, which is his terminology for basically what I would say is God, you know, the supreme being. It is seeking to reduce entropy, which is he's a physicist, right? That's scientific terminology to say it's trying to minimize chaos and randomness. Or the Masons say what? Out of chaos, order. Well, you think about like Egyptian mythology, and it talks about Ra, or in many cases in earlier dynasties, Atum thinking the universe into order. Atum, Adam. There's a divine order to the existence of the universe. And I think our mind is no different, and it has a hard time latching onto things, and it wants definitions. It wants labels. So people are like, I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. Me, I'm neither. I'm dead serious. I stopped voting. If people vote, that's fine. I'm not trying to make anybody, I'm just saying because I really believe this, that about a few years ago, I realized this isn't real. This is stealing my energy. So why am I giving to this? It's just harmful. So I stopped playing the game. And I think that's true for so many things. Like people are all into rap culture. Like, yeah, you know, fucking so-and-so's beefing with so-and-so. It's like, they're both rapping about bitches and drugs. Like, why do I care? Why do I care? You know what I mean? It's this egregor of all these different cultures. So, of course, it's okay to like that stuff, but like, there hits a certain level where you have to, in one way or another, like, be aware. And also, I think there's varying degrees of sensitivity. Some people are so spiritually sensitive that these choices really, really matter. Mm-hmm. Let me elaborate further. I believe that the more you become connected to spirit, the more the sensitivity increases because the faculties are awakening. They're unfolding. So that you really have to become conscious of the things that you consume. That's why it's so important on the spiritual path or the esoteric path, or you could say the Templar path, or whatever path, the yoga path, it doesn't matter. There's a big emphasis on what you eat. You should eat healthy. You should eat natural. You should not consume too much negative or dark material. I'm guilty of that. I like horror movies sometimes, but I have genuinely been watching them a lot less because I am finding that they affect me differently than when I was 25. You know what I mean? And there's an effect. There's some invisible world where the things we believe, the things we align with, the things we consume, the things we allow, you can think of it like an entity attachment to them. Because the mind likes order, so it thinks things into being. And when you have billions of people thinking a similar thing into being, it becomes true. It becomes a living entity that has a will that attaches to us. Okay, so then in the larger question of philosophy, what do we call this? What do we call what do we call the notion of being a good person, walking the spiritual path, being better, being kind? I call it the way. It's the way. It's being like Christ. But to me, it's the way. And the reason I say that is because Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life, and none will get to the Father except through me. But I have a deeper understanding of this, which is that then they killed the guy, and then they're like, now we're going to go to war with our enemies and kill everybody who's not Christian and suppress any alternative version of his message and pass a law that says, if you do not accept this doctrine and say this exact creed, which is like the Nicene Creed and there's others, confessing that you perfectly believe our version of this doctrine, we're going to murder you. We're going to kill you. And it got way out of whack. So Christianity today is not who Christ actually was. He wasn't saying, you got to worship me. He wasn't saying follow me in the sense that I'm your master. I've read the New Testament 2 or 3 times over, and I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm telling you, like, I could pick this up and show you right away. There are parts in there where he literally tells the people following him, like, don't claim a master or a rabbi. No one is above you. I'm not above you. People would get down and he'd be like, get up. You know what I mean? You don't pray to me. You don't even pray to angels. You pray to God alone. There's one true God. And it's a light. It's a spirit. That's what he said. It's the spirit of light. And we're the sons of light. And, and there's so much more to that. There's a lot of parts in the New Testament that allude to the greater sort of Gnostic, esoteric doctrine. And at this point, it's pretty obviously coming to light that, at least from where I'm standing and the conversations I'm having and the experiences I'm having, that it's true, But the point was never what the Apostle Paul said, which was Romans 10:9. You have to confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ was born of a virgin, was crucified, descended for 3 days, and then on the third day rose again and, ascended. And according to technical Christian doctrine, it's like, if you don't confess that with your mouth, no matter what you've done in your life, even if you've donated 1 billion puppies to kids with cancer and you've, done the best thing in the world and bought free Disney World tickets for 1 million Make-A-Wish kids and donated water to homeless people in Iraq or whatever best thing, those are silly. I'm being silly, but whatever best things you could imagine that anyone has ever done, none of it matters if they did not confess Romans 10:9. The sinner's prayer to be saved. It all hinges on this magical formula that you're supposed to say with your mouth. This is like real, true Christian doctrine, at least the way I was raised, and Pentecostal, which is pretty freaking hardcore, dude. It's like OG hardcore, old school, like get down and dirty, we are separate from the world. This is Christianity. That you have to confess this magical line with your mouth, and if you don't, you're damned to hell for all eternity. It all hinges on a utterance of a confession of a belief, and then you're saved. And of course, other things like you got to be good, you got to be baptized. But the main thing is to be saved. It starts there. You have to confess that. That's all wrong. That's so wrong. I don't think he was ever saying that. And I think that the true point has always been there is a narrow path. There is a way to carry yourself, you could say an egregor, or an embodiment of being that you must be to evolve, to ascend, to achieve immortality, or as they call in Tibet, Dzogchen, which means the light body, which I believe Jesus, I totally am beginning to believe that he did. I used to have a hard time believing after learning a lot of this stuff. I'd be like, well, I don't know if he did. I don't know. Like, what does it matter? I really am beginning to believe that he did ascend, and he just chose not to die. Whatever. I don't care who believes that. I am truly beginning to believe that light body is possible. And we are evolving towards that path. And there's the macro and the micro, and that for all of this time in the thousands or millions or however long years of evolution of mankind, that's happened some here and there in the micro. But I think we're hitting a point on the macro where evolution, or we're evolving at such a rapid rate because of the spread of technology and how everyone is so connected now, and the world is getting so dark. But dude, anytime like a puppy's tail is stepped on in Iraq, it's world news, and every iPhone you go click and everybody sees it. You know what I mean? It's hard to, everything is so amplified now. And even if things were not as bad as people think they are, they believe it. So it might as well be. Do you know what I mean? And because we all believe a certain thing, it affects our life here. So yeah, I think that the human mind seeks order, that it seeks some sort of thing to attach to. So it wants to attach to Republican, it wants to attach to Democrat, it wants to attach to Buddhist or Christian or blank, whatever it is. Fan of anything, really. Fan of anime, fan of rap, fan of movies, fan of whatever. It wants to attach and attach and attach. So I think as we walk this path of spiritual evolution, we have to remember to be careful what thoughts we are feeding. Fear, negativity, anger, all the 7 deadly sins, but even specifically like the darkness of the world, the things that are going on in the world. I had an experience last week where a being told me, it was more or less like, I didn't see a being, but it was kind of like a voice, it's just like a message, just like like one of those kind of psychic experience that I was talking about earlier. They happen to me somewhat. It just happens. It's like, it's just laying there and it's just like poof, and I don't know how to explain it, but it told me not to address the darkness anymore. Only address the light. Not to be engaged with those dark forces. Not to be, my job isn't, I used to think my job was to sit here and combat the darkness. And I think that was wrong. I think that's always wrong. I think our job is always and only to shine a light, to help other people to see the light, to help people grow, to only focus on the light, only focus on the positivity, because your energy flows where your attention goes. So what you're putting your mind and your thoughts into is where you are going to, where you're going to go naturally. I mean, that's just common sense, but that includes like things in the world. And I'm not saying, you have to be an ascetic monk and you can't be a part of society and you can't, I'm not saying don't pay attention to things, like, pay attention to things, but on some level, you are responsible for maintaining your emotional thought form attachment to the things that happen out in the world, out and, around you. Now, I think we are all weak because we are human, and by definition, we come here and we are a flawed creation. That's not a bad thing. That's not an insult, but I think we are imperfect because we exist in the only reason we exist here is because from the perfect spiritual world, we said, I really would like to experience, joy or jealousy or fear. So we come here to learn, we come here to experience those things which we don't need in perfection. So by definition, we're imperfect here, and that's not a bad thing. But because of this, I think none of us are perfect. I think every single one of us are prone to making mistakes and having misgivings, being upset, emotional, caught off guard. Like there's no human alive, I believe, that is perfect. I think that there are some people that have, developed a lot of wisdom through experience, but nobody here is perfect, and everybody has room for error and mistakes. But ultimately, it is our responsibility to, be careful what thought forms we're feeding, what we are, becoming engaged with, because these are real things and they have a vibratory effect on our consciousness. So anyway, I feel like I'm pretty satisfied with where we're at. And next week, I wanted to focus a little bit more on like the way. And it's not a religion. It's not a creed or a dogma. I genuinely believe that it's a spiritual technology, that it's truly what I believe to be the path to, I guess you could say, like spiritual growth. It's like in Buddhism, they say that attachment leads to suffering. And they have I think it's called the Four Noble Truths. And then there's the Eightfold Path, which is like the program to, kind of deal with the reality of the Four Noble Truths. And if I remember correctly, the Four Noble Truths I have a hard time remembering all four, but it's like attachment leads to suffering. And because of this, I don't know, you're going to have to help me out. You're already Googling it. But it's basically, there's a way to deal with suffering. That path is the Eightfold Path. And then Help me out here, man.
I'm trying.
The Four Noble Truths of Buddhism.
I'm trying to get it in simple terms here.
Attachment leads to suffering.
The truth of suffering, the truth of cause, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering,
which is the eightfold path.
The truth of the path.
Right. That sounded more than 4.
No, that was 4. Truth of suffering, the truth of cause of suffering, the truth of cessation of suffering, the truth of the path.
Oh, there you go. So the point is, attachment leads to suffering. But, I don't even remember where I was going with that, because then we had the whole Google thing. Help me out here.
Oh.
Yeah, that's a good sign that it's time to wrap it up. But no, it's all good. My point is that there's a path. There's a oh, fuck it. I don't remember where I was going with it.
Great job otherwise. I really enjoyed this one.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to next week's. I feel like it's universal. You know what I'm saying? It's the idea that there is a way, there's a path to growth. And I don't think it's a religion. I think it's universal. I think that it's a way, it's a spiritual technology. That's what I was getting at earlier with the Four Noble. That's exactly what I was saying, that it's spiritual technology, and that it's something that when we do this, it's a program to, oh, dude, I'm sorry. It's coming back to me now. I was spinning because it's like ADHD thought. I was saying one thing and then I said the other thing and then I waited for the Google and I forgot. What I was saying is the spiritual technology is the path to be happy, be fulfilled, be full of joy, have growth, development spiritually, but also I think it is the best path to not be suffering in this world. That's why I brought up the suffering of Buddhism, because it is fundamentally, I believe, a condition to suffer in this world if we do not have some level of mastery of emotion and thought. So that's why it's so important to, in some way, strive to grow. Because if we don't, we'll get complacent. We won't be evolving, and we'll be stuck in like cycles and loops of just being in the same place and not maturing, not growing, being unhappy, being unfulfilled, not manifesting our desires. Like, I truly do think that we come here into human life to learn true unconditional love, which can only be achieved through the spiritual path. And obviously the spiritual path is universal. But talk about egregores to round out the episode here and sort of bring us into next week's topic. I do believe that the reason there's so much resonance and a wealth of symbolism and allegory with Christ is because I think that this is a very real and powerful egregore. And I think that it is a force that, and then the lady, right? The Holy Spirit. That's another one we can talk about next week. I have heard it suggested by people very deep into the esoteric traditions after decades of very real, like intimate experience. I meet a lot of interesting people in my life, right? But I've heard it even suggested that we are egregores thought into form by God. And we have to understand that all things are thought into form by one consciousness or another in every level of existence. In the sense that we are creating thought forms, we are thought forms created by the mind of God. So when we really peel apart this layer of understanding of these alchemical and esoteric traditions, this is the crux of what they were saying. The first law of Hermeticism is the universe is mental, that it is a mind. It's the mind of God, or the Logos in the book of John. It says in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, or the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? I reversed them on accident. But a lot of people would say, well, the Logos means the Word. Or no, I messed that up. They say in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The original Greek translation of word is logos. Logos to the effect meaning like a mind, because it was written in Greek. Do you see what I'm saying? And it goes on and on. Gnostic thought, Egyptian thought, all these different very powerful philosophic and esoteric traditions. They're all saying the same thing, that the universe is a mind, right? So, yeah, I don't want to go in circles forever about it, but it's important to, I believe, learn to take the reins of our thoughts, but also understand that we're not perfect, and we have to start somewhere, and it's okay to make mistakes. Everybody gets mad. You can't, the worst thing that you can do is like get frustrated with yourself and give up because you feel like you can't do the whole thing. That's not the point. The point is to try. The point is we all have a responsibility to move forward towards growth, towards evolution, towards virtue, towards being a better person. And that's, the only way the world is going to change, I believe. That, so many more of us in the world are so sick of the horrors that are happening here that we say, this is enough. Like, we need to be better than this. We need a higher way of living and being. And I think it starts here. I think it starts now with the spiritual path or the way, like what Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life. So I think it's a way forward, it's a way that we can follow that is, the blueprint for being connected to the divine. So anyway, love you guys. I'll see you next week. And thank you for your support. And I really hope you enjoyed this one. I know it was off the wall, but I'm just getting started.